One of the greatest marketing minds of today's generation has started his own NFT project. Let's talk about it. So first and foremost, not only did Gary Vee start his own NFT project, but ever since its inception, it's absolutely exploded. In a good way, of course. And that is the project that we're going to be talking about today, which is called VeeFriends. And before we talk about its overall broad potential and whether or not you can make money on it, we need to actually discuss what it's all about. So first and foremost, these are all drawn by Gary Vee himself, and each one is represented by an animal with a tagline like this or like this. And besides just owning one NFT made by Gary Vee and then that's it, nothing else, he actually included a general admission ticket to an event of his, which is called VeeCon. But depending on which VeeFriends that you own, your NFT might also have a particular utility, or you could call it access. Like for example, there are certain NFTs that guarantee you have dinner with Gary Vee, and maybe another one that gives you a VIP access. But regardless the access, it's actually a pretty cool feature to give real world value to the NFTs, so that way they're not just a JPEG on a screen. So now that you know what VeeFriends are and you're a little bit familiarized with the project, let's talk about, is it actually worth the price when you buy one of these? Because at the end of the day, they're not cheap. At the time I'm making this video, the lowest priced VeeFriend that you can get on the marketplace is around 6 to 7 Ethereum, which when you do the math, it's around 24,000 US dollars. So are these quirky little animal drawings really worth that hefty of a price tag? Well, it kind of just depends. I honestly think that if there is something attached to these VeeFriends besides the VeeCon general admission ticket, well, then it might have some real world value. But for just plain old tickets to an event for a few years and a JPEG that was drawn in under a minute, well, maybe not. The only other thing to keep in mind is that if Gary Vee himself decides to roll out more and more tokens or JPEGs, then that would create a problem. Now, if he never does this ever again, and these are the only tokens that he ever launches, and alongside his accomplishments, could theoretically make this a sort of signature-like product, kind of like celebrities that have maybe autographed something, and that becomes valuable just because their name is attached to it. And honestly, if he is eventually able to buy the jets, then that would likely make these JPEGs extremely valuable. Just like Michael Jordan or LeBron that win a few extra rings, everything that is signed by them is that much more valuable. So the time to actually make the most amount of money on something like this are pivotal points in a person's legacy. But what about the overall potential of the project? Is it gonna go up for decades to come, or maybe straight into the ground after a couple years like many NFT projects do? So let's talk about the price appreciation and the long term of VeeFriends. And the first thing to note before you can even analyze where it might go is the fact that this is Gary Vee's, as of right now, most prized possession. What do you mean by that? Well, if you know Gary Vee and his company VaynerMedia, you would know that they rely heavily on selling their brand authority and his innate ability to build and sell a particular vision. And with that said, if he wants to help other companies or big organizations set up their own very successful NFT project, like he's doing right now with MLB, he needs to be extremely strategic with his own project to show that it was a success. So putting an emphasis on building up the reputation of VeeFriends is absolutely critical in order for him to continuously do business in the NFT space long term. And the beautiful thing about all that is Gary Vee and the team do have the resources and the money to make this a grand slam. Now, of course, in order to make this project bigger and bigger down the road, you have to over time keep creating more and more utility for that said project. But the nice thing is the fact that this project, even though it isn't as, as popular as these JPEGs, the fact of the matter is that VeeFriends already has more utility than 90% of NFTs out there. So that begs the question, where do we go from here? Well, if the whole NFT market does end up crashing, which like any bubble always does, I think that the project would ultimately go down or at least sideways for quite some time. And as we've seen with other crypto cycles, it's usually around 3 to 4 years until the momentum finally starts to pick up again. Now, obviously, this is the more pessimistic side of things, and because of the utility that these tokens actually have in the real world, they should do just fine even through a crash. And then once the market picks up again, as long as there's added utility and Gary Vee and the team double down or triple down on the project itself, then this project is likely to explode in the next couple of cycles. Now, this of course could take 3, 4, all the way up to 6 and 8 years, but I don't think that someone with Gary Vee's audience is going to be playing the short game with something like this. Now, of course, if the NFTs that are growing right now experience a massive boom into the future and even grows through a bear market that crypto may face, projects like this, where they have real world value and a huge community behind it, will likely do pretty well into the long distant future. Now, you might be wondering to what extent it actually will go to. Kind of hard to tell, especially to the fact that a JPEG of a rock went for more than $1 million. And the reason for this is because a JPEG of a rock literally has no value or an unknown value, and the unknown of what something should be priced at is what can lead an absurd and insane volatility in a particular asset's price, even if at the end of the day it's worth zero. It's really what people are willing to pay for a particular asset that gives it its value. And I think the opposite can be true for something like Gary Vee's VeeFriends. And what I mean is, of course, it could at the end of the day just skyrocket in price like the JPEG of a rock, but more likely because his community are mostly level-headed people that have been kind of quote unquote been trained by Gary Vee to have an understanding of what real world value is versus something that's just, nonsensical and will crash just as fast as it went up. And so is VeeFriends valuation at today's levels around $24,000 per token a fair valuation for their NFT? Well, I think it might be. But at the same time, if these little cartoon characters jumped in valuation overnight to millions, if not tens of millions of dollars, then I could confidently say to not touch it with a 10-foot pole. Does that also mean that I'm going to be invested in them? Probably not. Not because I don't believe in the project, but I myself like to look for things that are still dirt cheap because the ROI and a potential of a 10 or 100x is that much greater. Of course, that comes with due diligence and research and even a little bit of luck in an industry that is so young. But I'm also not saying that VeeFriends won't have any growth in the future either. I think it will have a reasonable amount of growth going forward. Now, again, this is not financial advice by any means. I'm curious to know if you own any VeeFriends or if you're thinking about buying their NFT project. Let me know down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode, YouTube thinks that you might enjoy these videos as well.